Hey, good evening. Alvin, Reid, Ray Hartmann. And I got to tell you, I get a lot of emails, I get a lot of telephone calls. And one came across early this week, and it said St. Louis Realtors was apologizing for their role in redlining and housing discrimination throughout the St. Louis region. And very few things made me go, wow. Well, hey, I went wow. So we're joined tonight by Katie Berry, president of St. Louis Realtors, and Will Jordan, executive director of Metropolitan St. Louis Equal Housing and Opportunity Council. And Katie, I'm going to start with you, okay? But I am going to read part of it. And it is the leadership at St. Louis Realtors offers an apology to our association members and the communities we serve. Now I'm going to read just a little bit more. The discrimination to which the black community was subjected to was part of a system designed to cause residential racial segregation, led by the federal government, supported by the banking system and the real estate industry, and driven by practices like redlining and the use of restrictive covenants. These policies resulted in dual housing markets for white and black families in the metropolitan St. Louis area. Okay, that is heavy.
It is.
All right, and why did you decide to do that, and why did you decide to do that now?
So we really want to be good partners and stewards in this community. We live in the community. We live next to all of you all probably. And we knew that in order to really be good partners in this community, it was time to say we were sorry. And so it really came from a member who said, this is something you all need to do and think about. And so we spent about a year really doing some introspection and said, it's time to apologize. And not just apologize, but then to start doing some redress and thinking, what can we do to make a positive difference?
Now, Will, were you aware this was coming, or did you find out about the same time we did?
Well, let me tell you, I think I was aware that they were going to do it about, they kind of informed me a couple of weeks before when I subscribed to being one of the speakers. But the impact of it didn't hit me until the day of. I mean, it just really hit me over the head like a ton of bricks that they would actually do this. And so, yeah, I wasn't focused in on exactly what was about to happen until the day of.
Was this contentious among your members? You didn't present it as a result like, I've been invited to speak places and they say, well, the board voted 7-5 to invite you to come. Was it a vote? And if not, was there pushback within your organization?
Well, so our board voted unanimously to do it. So we're less contentious than you, I guess. No. But certainly it was a long conversation with our members. And there are over 9,000 of us in St. Louis, so they, don't agree that today was a cool day, all of them. We can't agree on everything. But certainly, like I said, it was a unanimous decision. So it is something that we are glad we did. Mm-hmm.
So, okay, insurance industry, automotive industry, banking industry, Kansas City newspaper, New York Times, Washington Post, they've made apologies. The St. Louis Post-Dispatch has not. So, I mean, I'm sure you had some that are saying, like, why are we doing this? Mm-hmm. Oh, and also, one of the calls that I made upon receiving this is, am I going to be reading these about other realtor organizations throughout the United States of America here in the next week? Like, they're the first of a wave, but was informed that this is unique to St. Louis. So, I mean, it does kind of put you out on Front Street, as they say.
Yeah, well, we're not the first to apologize.
Okay.
In 2020, Charlie Oppler was the president of the National Association of Realtors, so he made an apology.
Okay.
Chicago Board of Realtors has also done something similar. I don't know that any of them have done it in the same way or issued the same, here's what we're going to do moving forward parts of it. But it was nice that we did have a template, if you will. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I want to hear about what your organization does as well, because I don't want to leave the topic,
yeah.
but you obviously are, by the name, you are working for equal housing and opportunity, which has certainly been elusive in St. Louis, to put it mildly. Tell us about what you do as well.
So I've been running EHOC for 20 years, and we are a fair housing non-for-profit, primarily funded by HUD. We work with grants from the city of St. Louis, state of Missouri, also from time to time, smaller municipalities like Florissant, Missouri, or O'Fallon. And what we do is we're kind of like watchdogs. We're on the fence. We have attorneys. We have fair housing specialists that investigate systemic fair housing issues. For example, there was a case years ago, people don't know about it, Gundecker versus EHOC. And the city of Florissant, their mayor called us up and said, hey, every time they sell a house to a black person in Florissant, they send out a flyer and say they're moving in, and they start selling houses of the white people to move out, to move to St. Charles County and St. Peters. It was true. We studied them for 2 years, came back to Gordon Gundecker and said, hey, talk to your people because we're about to go to court. For 2 years later, they were still doing it, so we took a court case. Very conservative judge, Judge Limbaugh, didn't really care for, I don't think, the kind of way we approach with testing. And in dicta, one of the summary judgment decisions he was going to make it sound as if he was going to destroy the entire fair housing case law for the country. And we settled that case. Wow, it should have been a $16 million case. I think we settled it for $150,000 or $100,000, and most of that went to the attorneys. We had botched up fair housing, and really a lot of times the reason why you don't know much about EHOC is because we tried to stay out of the news for a while until we really got to the point where we were an organization that could show the results that we have now. And so here we are 20 years later, and we're one of the best fair housing organizations in the United States, as per HUD, with a Blue Ribbon Award that we won a few years ago. But more than that, we work with bank redlining cases. You see banks popping up all over St. Louis in areas like Martin Luther King on Page, and that was EHOC. That was our sleeper group. And a lot of people don't know the work that we've been doing behind the scenes. And we've been working with the St. Louis Realtors Association for over 10 years. When I first started 20 years ago, they were our biggest nemesis. They're the most powerful lobby in Jeff City. And we would come up against them quite a bit, and we would lose every time. But when Ms. Dunn took over, things really started to change. She started putting people in place to really understand the issues of all of their clients, and it made a change. And so here we are 10 years after that, and they're issuing an apology and a 22-step plan on what they're going to do. But I've been watching them. We've been on the fence. We've been suing municipalities together. We came against Florissant again later on. And we've been dealing with Maplewood. We've been dealing with a lot of jurisdictions that have tried to restrict African-American single moms in particular from renting housing in their municipalities. And they've been on the wall with us for over 10 years, and a lot of people don't know that about the Realtors Association, that at first they were our nemesis, and now they've been our partner for over 10 years. So what you're seeing now is our outgrowth that they started work a long time ago, and it makes sense that they would issue this apology.
All right, Will, you mentioned it. You did more than just issue an apology. You have a plan for the future, and I forgot the exact name of it, but tell me again, and just exactly what steps, and I know this also involved like hiring your first DEI director that's in charge of this plan. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so it's the Reimagining St. Louis plan, and it lays out 22 steps, and they include some legislative steps that have to do with getting those restrictive covenants off deeds, right? Because when they're still on there, they're illegal, but you can go buy a house still and see that I'm not allowed to buy this house. I'm not allowed in this neighborhood. And I've had agents in my office who had clients interested in buying a house, and they said, my kids will be safe here, but will their friends be safe here? And they ended up not buying a house in the neighborhood. And I would bet that those residents in that neighborhood had no idea that was even on those deeds.
Yeah.
So this would get those off the deeds. We also are working with some legislators on land banks throughout the state and county, and as well as doing some clear title legislation. So we've got those legislative goals. I would also add, kind of not related necessarily to righting the wrongs of that we did as far as with the black community, but currently we're also supporting MONA, which is the Missouri Non-Discrimination Act in the state legislature, because it is still legal in the state of Missouri to discriminate on housing based on someone's sexual orientation or gender identity.
Yep.
And so we would like to see that made illegal as well. But we're also working on education. Will talked about Karen Dunn, our director of education, who's done a phenomenal job, and she's really rolling out classes that have to do with both fair housing, implicit bias, so people really know that, oh, I need to be more conscious about this.
Yes.
And aren't repeating mistakes. So that's huge. And then working with neighborhood partners and in communities that have been systemically under-resourced to help provide housing and create more Black homeowners.
Did you help craft the 22-point plan, your organization, at all?
No, we didn't really. I think probably they had input based upon our relationship that we'd had for the last 10 years and understanding the needs that there were, but we didn't have direct input on the plan.
I would say Nate Johnson is a past president of St. Louis Realtors and is currently their EHOC president.
President of the board.
And he
Okay.
led the task force.
All right.
Well,
Yeah.
like Alvin, I was surprised to see this in the inbox. I don't remember seeing anything in the inbox from the banking industry. And when I think of redlining, that's certainly, and again, what you're doing is really amazing, but have you had any interaction with the banking industry, either one of you, and where do they fit in? Because if people can't get loans and can't get fair treatment in the financial
Absolutely.
segment, it doesn't seem, your plan, the question is how far can you go with your plan?
Right. Yeah, we didn't do this alone, right? The racism that we did within St. Louis was not only us, it was the banking industry, it was the federal and local governments. So I have not heard from the banks. Hopefully, maybe Mr. Jordan has.
I have, in fact.
Okay.
Yeah, so actually on the way over here, Brian Gibson, who is the community reinvestment banker for First Mid, who just bought Jefferson Bank. And, you know, my organization and our subsidiary, SLECRA, we protested the buying of that bank because of its historical significance, and we wanted to make certain this bank coming from Northern Illinois would do right by the people of St. Louis. So we entered into a community benefits agreement with First Mid, and Brian Gibson calls me up and he says, hey, Katie that issued the apology, that's great. What can we do to partner with them in order to get our products and services out to African Americans in North County and North City to help them, to give them some money behind the promises that they have to reverse the redlining and the things that have happened, because we are committed. And we have a community benefits agreement with that bank.
And they are from, excuse me, I just want a very quick follow-up.
Yeah.
They're from Northern Illinois?
That's right.
Is there any bank, I'm sorry, but is there any bank based in St. Louis that is cheerfully on board with this? I mean, we got, you know, the bank of, it's a bank from Washington, Missouri, and North Side, whatever one thinks about that, to get involved. When's the first, like, locally based bank going to step up?
There have been a few already. Midwest Bank, Orv Kimbrough, he is now their CEO. And let me tell you, there was a progressive number of acts that happened before he became the CEO. But Orv Kimbrough is running the show over there, and he's made a pretty hard commitment to helping Black businesses, Black homeowners. You know, of course, they have a bank on Page. They have a bank on Martin Luther King. And that's huge. You know, that was also with the influence of SLECRA and some work we've done with them. We had a community benefits agreement with them in the past, but they committed to continuing that type of work as per them hiring Orv Kimbrough. And they have been pretty committed, more so than any other local bank. There's a few others that have been trying to be on the wall, but I would say Midwest has made the largest commitment that they're following through with.
Just real quick, 25 words or less, what is redlining? So for those that don't understand, could you just kind of explain what
Redlining is when you don't issue loans to African Americans in certain areas, or you issue it at much higher interest rates, much higher cost, and thereby stripping opportunity and wealth out of the African American community. And that happened in St. Louis for a long time at the hands of you know, the Federal Home Loan Association, the federal government, banks, realtors. It was pretty much so complicit. And that happened for years and years in St. Louis, where you just couldn't buy a house in certain areas because you weren't allowed. You only could buy a house, say, in an all-Black area, but you couldn't buy a house in a changing neighborhood or a white neighborhood.
Okay, regardless of how much money, and you had Gold Star credit, you still couldn't buy the house.
Nope, couldn't get it.
Okay, so all right, I own a house, and I call a realtor because I'm going to sell it, and the realtor comes, and I said, like, under no circumstance am I selling my house to a white person. So if you bring a white person to my house, I'm not selling it to them. What does the realtor do then?
Well, they say, I'm sorry, I cannot work with you. And not only can I not work with you, but let me tell you about federal fair housing, because federal fair housing actually works both ways. It does not only protect black home buyers from racist white home sellers, it does it in the reverse as well. So you can't discriminate based on race, religion, color, national orientation. There's a whole list of them. Either way.
Okay. Like, I put a little spin on that.
I see what you were doing there. I didn't know where he was going with this. How much of this is in the past tense? How much of it is, you know, we've talked a lot about the history and we've talked about the apology. How much of it is in the past tense and how much of it is in the present and tense as well?
Well, I am actually very happy that we have the equal housing, right? We have EHOC because they kind of help act as a watchdog. I would like to say it's all in the past, you know, but we know that the black rate of home ownership really has not increased since the Fair Housing Act was passed. And so when that's been holding steady since 1968, and I think even dropping some, that shows us that it's not only in the past. Certainly our code of ethics would prohibit that. If anyone is ever catching someone doing that, we want them to turn them in. Also the Federal Fair Housing and HUD would come after them. Call EHOC, certainly, because we do want those actors out of our industry and to be educated and face repercussions. But it's often not blatant like it used to be. You know, if you put a red line on a map today, you're going to get fined as a bank.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things we know is the Realtors Association in St. Louis has been at the table for 10 years now. You're seeing it. We've been working with banks. Some we had to drag to the table kicking and screaming. Others are doing it voluntarily, like Simmons Bank, but they're out of Arkansas, right? They're not out of St. Louis. And then you have other industries that we still can't get a hold of that we think are making a tremendous impact negatively on the things that are happening. For example, you buy a house north of Del Mar. We know that there's appraisal companies that will refuse to look anything other than north. They won't look south for the value at all. Every other neighborhood, there's a circle. There, it's a half circle.
Really?
The semicircle. That's right, all the time. It's illegal, but it's so hard to prove because there's industry standards, right? There's not the same kind of regulation. Banks have CRA. Real estate agents have the Fair Housing Act. What kind of accountability are there for people who have a tremendous influence on what happens in neighborhoods like north of Del Mar, right? So that appraisal industry is one that we constantly have issues with appraisers that are looking in the city of St. Louis and North County, and they appraise houses so far below, not even close to even what another appraiser would give it. And oftentimes in St. Louis, those appraisals are based, their address is usually in St. Peters or St. Charles County.
Well, do you name names? I mean, for the average person who, and it isn't always the person's choice who the appraiser is, but if you want to get an appraisal, it would be helpful, I would guess, to people to know who some of these appraisers are. Are you in a position, is there somewhere people can go as a resource, say, here's the folks we've got to put on notice? Because that's probably hard for you to do, right?
It is hard for us to do. And another thing is, too, most of the time the banks are ordering their appraisals.
Right.
So it's got a lot to do with who the banks are like to use.
But you can't, I guess my point is, and this, I talked to a friend of mine who's close to this industry today, and he's happens to be a person to call her, and it's a little jaded, saying, well, it's nice, and you know, they wasn't trying to be too cynical about you in particular, because it's great what you're doing, but it's like, is that all there is? What do you actually, how's this going to affect me and my community going forward? How do you react to that?
Yeah, well, you know, words are words, and we hope that we can convince some people through actions, right? And convince folks that way. And that takes time. And we also know that this isn't a one-day project or a two-day project. This is, you know, years from now, we're going to be reassessing, say, what do we do next? So I know nationally there are some associations who are taking in stories about appraisals and things like that, and we see that as a national issue, appraisal issues.
Absolutely.
And so, but we cannot, that's not an industry that we supervise.
Right.
And
They're independent.
Biden's administration and federal government is getting involved in that, and Marshall Fudge through HUD.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Marshall
we've read a
Fudge,
couple
yeah,
of stories
absolutely.
through that. All right, the housing market itself, is that helping in that, you know, people are selling their houses and you're helping sell houses, and a lot of them are, you know, like been on the market 2 years. I own a house. Maybe I start putting aside some of my feelings because I just want to sell the house. And is that helping where, like, some of the stuff is, all right, I don't care. I don't care who buys my house because I just want somebody to buy my house. So is it kind of helping at all?
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly in the market recently, people have been getting multiple offers too. There aren't many houses sitting on the market.
Yeah,
for
but it's
years,
changed, yeah,
right? I will tell you that when I present offers to my clients and in a multiple offer situation, I do it blindly. So they don't see a name. They don't see that it's two people or one people or two male names, two females,
Yeah.
or that it's, you know, doesn't sound like they're from St. Louis or whatever. I do it blindly so that way we can sit there, look at the numbers, look at the closing dates, because it's not always about numbers,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
There are other terms that matter, but then I know that we've presented this in a fair way.
Well, I got to tell you this. I lived and worked in Arkansas for 4 years.
Okay.
Simmons Bank has changed their tune. If you're
I know that's right. I know that's right.
I'm going back to the 80s.
Yeah, yeah.
So, hey, I'm just like, when you said that, like,
Yeah,
same
that's
one
right.
I know?
Same one.
Come on, yeah. 'Cause
Same one, yeah.
Little Rock had this problem.
Yeah, yeah, that's
and
right.
They were probably the biggest lender in that area at the time, and they were on the wrong side of the fence.
Yeah,
Let's put it
yeah,
that
they
way.
have
So
changed. They really have.
They have
I know
changed.
George Mackritz over at Simmons, and they have made a huge change.
Okay.
Matter of fact, they hired a woman, African American woman in Little Rock. Her name is Marty. I think it's Marty North, but she has really rocked the entire Simmons Bank and is affected even in St. Louis. They got some of the best first-time homebuyer products in the country.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So I just, when you said that, I was like, not to be skeptical, but like, Simmons Bank?
Yeah, Simmons
No,
Bank.
we are talking about late 80s. We're in the 2020s now.
Yeah,
so,
they've changed quite a bit. They're awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, go ahead. Ray.
I want to resume beating my dead horse here because you mentioned Simmons just now. You called them out. Good for you. You know, they're a good example. The most famous, the original civil rights protest, the most famous one involved not a bank, but Jefferson Bank. And
That's
it was
right.
The great Bill Clay was one of the people that led it. and
Absolutely.
others. But it wasn't a bank. It was the, you know, it was,
The
and
bank.
there was over, you know, hiring practices and so forth. But the point is, at what point, under the heading of action, are banks specifically going to be called out and held to account publicly? So, for example, if there's a group of appraisers, and it's hardly an exact science, as you know, that are used by certain banks, and there's patterns that seem to be redlining still, which I'm guessing there are.
Yes.
What good does it do just that you're talking to them when the public doesn't know?
Yeah,
so
that's really good.
How do you get to that point? Is it something you can do? Is it something you can do?
Well, it's something-
Where do you
yeah.
get to where at some point it becomes something other than just a bank?
That's really good. We're already doing that. So there's a group called SLEEKRA, the St. Louis Equal Housing and Community Reinvestment Alliance, and they have a website as St. Louis sleekra.org. And you can take a look at the community benefits that we have. For example, the one we had with First Med, who bought Jefferson Bank, and you can see exactly what their commitment is to the community based upon that. And we meet with them on a regular basis, twice a year, to see how they're doing on those commitments.
Right.
And we have that agreement there, along with very many other agreements. And so you're exactly right. That's exactly what needs to happen. There needs to be not just the regulators having these private conversations with banks, but the community needs to know what the banks are going to do. And so we put those on that website, and you can go and take a look at it.
But those are the positive ones again. What about the negative ones? Are there ones where XYZ Bank isn't playing along, isn't working with us?
We don't have data for those banks.
But
These banks.
where do I find, if I'm someone in the community
Federal
wanting to
Reserve.
find out,
Yeah, Federal Reserve. Federal Reserve, you can find out information about all of their exams, about how they did, what the rating is, and why they're rating it. You can even look at the Federal Reserve and take a look, or the OCC and the FDIC, and take a look at how did they do with respect to their commitment to fair housing, right? Fair lending. There's a certain level of laws they have to follow. You can take a look at how they did on that portion of the exam. In fact, when we first started, we noticed that there were banks who did horrible on their fair lending, but yet they still got a great exam rating. And we couldn't believe that. Oh, yeah, and that's when we brought our first cases, because we disagreed with the regulators about whether or not this bank was doing good towards the community.
Okay. Just public reaction. We're in our last minute, so I'll ask you, Katie, public reaction over the last, I guess, 3 days. Not from realtors, not from people involved in housing, but what feeling are you getting?
Yeah, so I have received emails from past clients. I've received emails from members of my church saying, this is great. A woman from my church said, way to do some good justice work. So thus far, it has been positive.
Okay, I go to United Methodist Church, and we're easy in those. People I know. And said, like, hey, did you see this, Alvin? I said, yeah. We've seen it. It's going to be in the paper on Thursday.
Well, I grew up Methodist.
Okay. not that we're the only, one out there, but a positive reaction. All right, so anyway, thank you guys so much. All right. Hey, this was a powerful week, and I think it's very good for St. Louis, and that's an editorial comment, but hey, it's only getting started, right?
Yes.
That's right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.